on here on the computer.
And we are live, ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people. Thank you all for coming on today. I will show my face here shortly.
Yeah, being dark and mysterious there, Marcus.
Hey, you know how I roll. Always dark and mysterious looking. I used to like not smile as a kid. Like I remember when I was in high school, and this girl like came up to me and she was like, "Don't you ever smile?" I don't know. It's just like it's my physical demeanor. Or, I don't know what. Anyway, I digress. We have a new guest on tonight. Now, I really don't want to butcher your name. Sisa, C,
Sisa.
Sisa.
Hi.
Okay,
Cisa, nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you guys.
it's
Hi,
nice to meet you.
everybody. Sisa Quispe.
Sisa Quispe. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful last name. First name. Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, so again, thank you for coming on. We do have some other guests that will be on too tonight.
Awesome.
I guess they're coming. They're here on the virtual online.
Yeah.
Um, and this is your first time using live stream, correct? Did you have any issues,
Yeah.
or
I'm sorry.
I said, did you have any issues coming on?
I just have to download Safari again because I deleted it from my iPhone. But that's it.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
understand that. Some people, it's kind of like, I don't know, StreamYard gets kind of twitchy a little bit. I
Oh.
think especially for new people that haven't used it before, so it might give some issues. But now you are on the East Coast, correct?
Yeah. New York.
Nice, very cool.
Yeah. Lenape territory.
Mm. Now you lived there most of your life.
No, I moved here 5 years ago, actually. Yeah. I used to live in
Okay.
Peru.
Yeah. So another Peruvian. This is perfect because we just got done
Uh-huh.
talking to another great Peruvian guy's name was Moore. Maybe you saw him on here.
No. What is
Oh,
his name again?
his name is Morley Adama.
Morley. Huh. I'm gonna
Yeah.
look it up.
Yeah, he's a really
Morley.
great guy. We had him on. He's very, very knowledgeable about Peruvian archaeology and
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, he's a really cool person. But yeah, as you know, I'm also from Peru as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I lived there for like 6 months, and then I ended up here in the U.S. But I recently went back, and Lima's such a nice city. And I'm sorry, did you say where in Peru again?
Yeah, I am from Tacna, which is like a really small city in the south, like next to Chile. And I also live like nearly 9 years in Arequipa, which is like a little north um, from Tacna. But then my family is from Cusco and Puno. So it's a whole mix.
Interesting. That's really
Yeah.
fascinating because I was in Puno too, and
Where?
Cusco as well. I went to
Oh, you
Cusco
were
and
in
Puno.
Puno and Cusco?
Yes,
Oh, es
yeah,
hermoso. It's so beautiful.
it really is extremely
Yeah.
beautiful.
I
Um,
was there I was in Cusco for a month and a half, and it was so hard to leave.
yeah,
I
I know,
was, I
right? Like,
left the place crying. I was crying.
yeah, I was there, and I was only there for a short time. I didn't want to leave. There was so much
Yeah.
more like to see and do, and I ventured out a little bit, but I mostly was in Cusco for Machu Picchu
Yeah.
and for going on a few other trips, like going to Puno. I think there's a Lake Titicaca,
Sí, de
which
Lake
is
Titicaca.
yeah, Lake Titicaca, which is
Uh-huh.
right
So
next.
huge.
Yeah, it's really big, and I
Yeah.
was on one of the islands where there's houses and whatnot, and
Oh,
it
yeah. Taquile or de Uros? Uros.
oh, I'm not,
Uh-huh.
I don't remember the name.
Yeah.
I
I was there
apologize.
in December.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah, this last December. Yeah.
it's awesome. So you go back.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it seems that things are kind of all right there in terms of COVID.
Not really.
Not really. Uh-oh.
No. When I left, they were like using double masks and also like facials. So like
Uh,
shield facial, kind of like
mhm.
that. So yeah. Mm, also they were like about to vaccinate people from 40s to 30, between
Okay,
30s and 40s, something like that.
gotcha.
Yeah, so it's doing okay. Yeah, not the best, but it's fine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope things improve. Oh, we have one of our other friends, Lakota guy. He is finally coming on. So I'm going
Sweet.
to go ahead. Oh, I don't remember pressing the ad, but he's in here now. Hello, Lakota guy.
Oh, hey guys,
Nice.
sorry about that. My equipment was jacked up. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can hear you
yeah.
Okay,
fine.
great.
Can hear you loud and clear, my friend.
All right, perfect.
And I'm here too. So, the purpose of this video today, I think the two things that I wanted to go over, which I think we went over as far as like what the article was that I sent you,
Yeah.
was talking about us, reclaiming and saying that we are, native and racially indigenous. And regarding the article, which was about, I think in Canada, where a native indigenous man was very, I guess I wouldn't say skeptical, but I mean, he had some good reason, I think, to be somewhat envious of those that were saying native, because there were people there that were claiming benefits while being what 1%, having 1% indigenous blood or something like that. And I was curious on what your guys' thoughts are, because for Wanchalo and I, we both reconnected, more so Wanchalo than me. I am adopted, and we do get some I guess criticism, I think, from particularly maybe those from groups, indigenous tribes that might be saying no, like you shouldn't say that you're racially, indigenous. And from the article, I can understand if from people maybe lying and saying because the 1% thing, But for Wanchalo and I think another thing is that we have no interest in claiming any benefits of or speaking over anyone, We're here for a reason, and that's to support, other, mostly obviously indigenous tribes, but for all of us, to come together and make a difference in this world and make, change history. That's what we really want. So I was curious on what you guys' thoughts are, and I think there's someone else that's waiting to come in, and we're
Oh,
going.
that was just my laptop. I'm gonna like present screen so like maybe our viewers can see the article we were talking about.
Sounds good. Yep, have it up right here.
Let me see
So
here.
yeah, and Wanchalo and I in this channel, the purpose of this channel is to help us reconnect, and come together. Our views on Mestizaje, I think, to our viewers is quite clear. I don't think I need to rehash that. So yeah, I was curious from two other people that are a part, of tribes, beautiful Lakota, and I don't know I apologize pronouncing the tribe that you are from. Sisa.
Sisa? Okay, I am Quechua and Aymara.
Perfect. That's great. And I should, before we start on that, I should give the introduction to you, please. You have wonderful TikTok videos, which really caught my attention, and I think obviously you're a very popular person on TikTok. So for everyone that's on
well,
here,
I wanted to say hi to Lakota guy. I'm a huge fan of you. I follow you everywhere too. So I'm very excited to meet you too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, my name is Sisa Quispe. I am an indigenous Peruvian. I am Quechua and Aymara, and I live here in the U.S. in Lenape territory, aka New York City. And I am an artist, and as an artist, my mission is, to empower our people, not to bring unity between us, and basically also to help. You cannot love what you don't know. So I think like most of our lives we have been educating ourselves in the wrong narrative, and I believe like when we have these conversations, we learn the most from us. So yeah, that's it. That's me. Oh, I love doing TikToks as well. Yeah, and I'm like a visual artist. I love to act, and I'm studying a master's in filmmaking as well.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. That's really great. And I was going to ask you, the videos that you make, sometimes I see the comments and you get some a lot of some opposition, I will say, back.
Yeah, I try to jump in and defend you and stuff too. So.
What a
Oh,
great
really?
guy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm trying to jump in there to help out.
There's like comments that are like crazy, but you know, at the beginning it really like kind of got me, but now I'm so used to it. I'm like, whatever. Some of them I delete them, like because some of them are like so bad, and I delete them if I see them. But sometimes I cannot control it. Today I saw one guy who told me, "Oh my God, you're like such a hate colonizer. You're like a Lance version," and I felt like, wow, that's so cool that he compared me with Lance, you know, with Modern Warrior. But yeah, you know, there is just some people who won't like you for, I don't know, for whatever reason. So you won't like anybody, and at the end, it makes me happy. I'm just a woman who is reconnecting, and for me it's such a joy, and it brings happiness to me sharing with others, and that's what it makes me keep going, and that's why I enjoy it. You know, once I feel like this is too much, a lot of drama, and it's taking more out of me, I feel like I'm going to stop. But right now, you know, I'm just sharing what I'm learning, and I am sharing this journey with a lot of people. So that's it.
We love seeing the journey. I have to ask, though, you know, the opposition that you get are from maybe some people from South and Central America as well.
Yeah.
And you said their comments are so, you know, really mean. Why do you think they have such resentment? Or do you think they're just born to, or they're raised in a way that thinking in this sort of way is very not good? I'm just curious on your thoughts on why they think like this, because I want to learn, like.
Yeah, well, there's some people, I kind of understand where they're coming from, because at some point I thought in the same way. You know, I thought that we were all mestizos, that I was not indigenous. I thought that I have to look in a specific way to be indigenous. I thought that to be beautiful, you had to be in a specific way, you know, and I believe what society makes me, you know, whatever society told me and I experienced, you know. But when I started to question myself, and that's how my journey started, right? So I kind of understand where are they coming from. So I know and I accept at this point that my video is not, or whatever I do, I'm not going to convince them in that moment, that it's going to take them time. It's not going to be me. It's going to be many different experiences, you know, like, okay, now I hurt her, and then probably in the future that person is going to hurt somebody else, and then eventually it might change their opinion, you know. But it's something that I understood. I'm not going to change the opinions of people at that moment, but I know that somehow I am helping, you know. At least they know that exists. So I'm just trying not to take it personal. I mean, I'm an actress, so I'm so used to like rejection, you know, because I do so many auditions. So yeah, I'm just trying to not make it personal. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. And Lakota guy, again, you know, welcome back for a third time.
Whoa,
yeah, we have the name, he's an honorary guest.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If Lakota guy ever gets canceled, he has a permanent home here on Indigenous podcast.
No, I always love this space. What I really like about it, it's organic. It's an organic space of unity, of Indigenous unity. And those spaces are so precious to us as Indigenous people, because, you know, a lot of us, regardless if we're in the United States, First Nations communities, or anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, we tend to just be all about and focus our attention on the issues and oppression facing our community. And it's good to be in a space where we all can talk about, you know, pan-Indigenous issues that unify all of us together. So furthermore, I just want to introduce myself in my traditional Lakota greeting that I'm bound to give. How matakiapi ampeto numpa washte yelo yuha chante washte nape chayuza pelo wambli wakia imachi apilo ma ina mato wetakpe tioshpae Matungashila Wagluhe Tioshbaye. Ocheti Shokon Amataha. I agree with a good heart and a warm handshake. My name is Eagle Thunder. That's the name that was given to me at birth. My people come from the Black Hills of occupied South Dakota territory. I'm part of the Ocheti Shokon, which is a 7-nation council confederacy of the Great Sioux Nation in the Plains Nation of the occupied territory called the United States. And I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much. I think this topic is really important when we, segue to understanding what indigenous spaces are, and how do we occupy those spaces. And I think that that article, Juan Cholo, that you posted that you're going to be showing our audience is so important, because this is a conversation we need to have of, how do we not only reclaim indigenous spaces, but how do we do so in a good way? As Lakotas, we say chante washte. How do we have a good heart towards our other relatives that are on a different journey of reconnecting? I consider it a privilege in 2021 to be an indigenous person that didn't have that reconnecting experience, that we were all connecting with each other. But that place of privilege means that people like me, who have always been connected, need to help those that are reconnecting and come from a good place of a good heart. That's the type of unity that we need to see, not only nation to nation unity, but experience unity of reconnecting, because we're all indigenizing and decolonizing our way of thinking. And part of that is language reclamation. I think this article is really important because it speaks about an experience someone has real life with a space in a college, in a colonial education standpoint. In a lot of colonial educational institutions, it's very antagonistic to indigenous thinking. What I mean by that is that a lot of this thinking takes place in a colonial mindset. This civilization that they present to us is antagonistic towards us as indigenous people, first of all. Second of all, we have to colonize the way that we think and relate to each other in order to achieve like a master's, a bachelor's, a PhD, those type of things. So having a indigenous space in a colonized institution, educational institution, is important to think about how do we maneuver in those spaces. We're talking about 574 federally recognized tribes, 630 up in First Nations communities, and thousands in occupied territories of Mexico, Central America, South America, all the way down to the Mapuche nations. I mean, all of this is different ways and different flavors of colonization, but nonetheless, it's colonization. And what colonization has tried to teach us is to look at ourselves as a skin color. That's why I'm against things like saying brown pride, because that is antagonistic towards nationhood, of understanding what my nation is. My nation is more important to me than the color of my skin or my phenotype, how I present as. Me upholding my nation and upholding my people means more to me than the color of someone's skin and what they look like. So it's a complicated issue, one with a lot of nuance, Marcus, and I think it's a great place to start.
Certainly. I wanted to show the article, but let me try to present screen again. Let me know if this is actually going through or not. I think I had an issue at first. Let me see.
I put myself on mute on accident. I wanted to say, yeah, thanks, Lakota guy. And yeah, Juan Cholo, you're going to share that article. So
yep.
Let me just put that on here. All right.
All right. Yeah. So this is the article, guys, that we're talking about. I dropped it in the link there on the live chat. So it's a pretty short article if you guys want to give it a read. And so, like, after reading this, I definitely had a couple thoughts, and I saw where this guy was coming from, where he was saying people that weren't traditionally indigenous, people that barely had indigenous DNA, like 1%, or people that were just like, in his opinion, they just looked like white people, or some people that didn't even know they were indigenous up until like a year before they applied for like this type of scholarship. He was having issue with them applying for benefits, and I agree with him. So I agree. There's parts of the article that I disagree with, and there's parts of it that I agree with. So one other thing is, in the Discord that we have, a brother named Daniel Valencia also dropped this one video that ties into this, where it's in Spanish. I'll also drop the link for you guys to this one as well. Let me drop that. Okay, so this one is talk about candidates that are like mestizo, that are like trying to represent communities they are not actually a part of. There are apparently there's specific representative seats in Mexico in certain regions that are just reserved for the traditionally indigenous, and there's some people that are mestizos, that are faking, committing fraud. They're saying that they're traditionally indigenous or part of this community, and then they're trying to represent it, but only for a power grab, which I think is very vile, and it's in my opinion, it's like a crime of moral turpitude, in my opinion, to do something like that. But so after watching that video that Daniel Valencia sent and reading this article, I wanted to present at least the opinion of this podcast. Marcus follows in line with this, as to what we mean when we say reconnect indigenous in an indigenous fashion, and to say that you're indigenous. All right. So what we're saying reclaim being indigenous. We mean that only in a social, personal, and limited political way. What I mean by that? So personally, it means you're basically saying you're indigenous. You're going to embrace that identity. You're going to do the work. You're going to go and try to learn your roots. You're going to try, if there's a tribe, try to rejoin it. If you can't, that's fine. But you're going to be respectful. You're going to try to learn your history, your culture. That ties into the personal. The social is with your friends and family. You'd be saying, I'm indigenous. So you're going to hold to that no matter what, right? So you got to honor up to it. You can't just slip in and out of it if you're going to say that you're indigenous. It's not something that you just get to wear whenever you want. And then what I mean by political is just, if we're talking about demographics, if we're talking about a questionnaire that asks about race, we're talking about a census, then you say you're indigenous to reclaim that right on paper. But our stance is, as far as, we have like a no benefit stance. In my opinion, if you're not traditionally indigenous or part of a community, you should not be applying for American Indian or indigenous scholarships. You should not be applying for any benefits under the government, whether that be here or in Mexico or any of these other countries, if you're detribalized. That's our stance.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think most people would agree with, especially those that follow us here, is that we have no interest in claiming any benefits. If anything, that would be, I think, a disgrace to those that are actual part of tribes and whatnot. We're here to, assist in giving those that are, disenfranchised and less fortunate a voice. Can you imagine the type of power that we would have if we all came together? That's a huge buying power, a political power, a force to be reckoned with. Of course, it would take time, but yeah, that's what I think that, Juanchelo and I stand for, is just we have no interest in trampling over anyone's rights or anything of that nature. No.
Right. We don't have any interest in benefits, and those of us that follow us, you shouldn't either. It should just be about the identity on a personal level. And, if you again, taking it back, on paper, the census or something like that, not in, let me go apply for benefits under the government, or these people, let me go be a fraud and pretend that I represent a tribe that I don't. That's completely vile. If you do that, you're garbage. But so we're not advocating for anything in which that. So we wanted to make that very, very clear here on this stream. It's a no benefit stance.
Yeah, definitely. Also, we got another guest coming in, so gonna add him in real quick. And I hope it play rare. We just got done talking about an article. Juancho, I think you already shared it with him, essentially saying how those of us that are reconnecting to our, our indigenous roots, that we should not be claiming any benefits that are reserved specifically for tribes. And I hope that, I assume you agree with us on that, Cleaver. Also, welcome again. Good to see you. Wait for him, maybe his mute's off. But yeah, going back, Lakota guy, I was curious on your thoughts on that, because I know, I've heard the word pretendian tossed around by a lot of northern, or not northern, but tribes in the United States. So I was just curious on what because I need to know more about what pretendian is. Is that just for a specific, group of people, or just those that are saying, oh, my great grandmother was Cherokee, so I should be something, something, something?
Yeah. So, there's in the, I guess the lower 48 plus Alaska, the idea or the understanding of the identity of what being American Indian is a nuanced thing, because you have multiple different ways that you are indigenous in the United States as an American Indian. So you're ethnically indigenous. What that means is that by blood or blood quantum, ethnically and phenotypically, you're an indigenous. So I would be considered phenotypically, ethnically indigenous, considering that's who I am. I'm Lakota by blood, right? But we also have something called federal trust responsibility. And what that means is that we have a nation-to-nation agreement with the United States. And part of that is self-determination of all these different tribes. What self-determination means, in a very simplest way to put it, is that each nation, according to the 1974 Self-Determination Act, is able to determine what being American Indian in that tribe means and what that identity means. There's certain criteria that is in that constitutional charter that is able to determine, their tribal council is able to determine if they are going to go via lineal or blood quantum descent in order to be an enrolled federally recognized tribal citizen. So via that Self-Determination Act, a lot of tribes with heavy admixture, I'm talking a lot of, northeastern tribes like the, I want to say Wampanoag and Penobscot tribes are a lot of admixed in African-American admixture. And then you look at current Cherokee Nation, Eastern Band of Cherokee, they are heavily mixed with European. So you'll have blonde hair, blue eye, indigenous people that are authentically indigenous because they are federally recognized tribal members, part of that constitution, that are equally indigenous as someone like me. So there's so we have to understand the nuance of indigenous identity. I'm a tribal citizen of the Rosebud Sioux Nation, but I'm also ethnically indigenous. So it's a different way to kind of conceptualize what indigenous compared to somewhere say Central or South American, where it's more played on the ethnic side of it, and identity is way more complex when we talk about encomienda, caste system, etc., like that. So when we think about these spaces, and I want to get back to Juan Cholo, that first article, if you don't mind, but I think these type of things are important to understand when we think about indigenous spaces. And the term pretendian that Marcus brought up, to me, is similar to someone that does not have any connection to the land and being indigenous, or any relationship to an indigenous people, but continue to perpetuate a false narrative that they are indeed indigenous. Regardless, my great grandmother was Cherokee princess, my great grandmother was a Creek chief, etc. This is what I'd call a pretendian, or someone that's an Afrocentric, ethnocentric, pseudo erasure type person who claims that, oh, well, African Americans, quote unquote, black people, are the original American Indians and everyone else is some sort of Mongolian invader. So that's what I consider pretendian. When we consider what racist chameleon grifters are, this is what that article kind of spent a lot of time on. It's people who somehow now have some sort of cultural connection that is able to apply for that type of area, that type of space that college made. And I would say this: it's a fault of that actual institution for not having clear and concise barriers of entry to determine who is and who isn't genuinely indigenous. And if it's in the United States, why not rely on tribal enrollment to determine who gets the benefit of occupying that indigenous space, while keeping in mind tribal disenrollment, as well as our Mesoamerican brothers and sisters that didn't have any type of relationship, nation to nation, with the United States.
I was going to tackle a quick comment because I see sometimes our followers, they disagree, or they disagree with what you say, Lakota guy, in the sense of, like, you can have somebody that's blonde hair, blue eye, and be native. So there's two distinctions, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lakota guy, but you have you're racially native and the ethnically. So ethnically, the simplest way to put it is think of a tribe as a nation. It's like a country, right? In essence. So if it's a nation, any person of any race per se can be part of a nation, right? That's not reserved to a single race.
Yeah, I want to be really careful with that language because racializing indigenous people has been part of the colonization that they want to imply and push on indigenous people. And we're not a race. We are nations of people, right? And part of that is an understanding that regardless of different phenotypes, skin colors, etc., you can still be authentically indigenous. So the differentiator here with what Luis Ramirez is saying is that it's a misunderstanding on what nationhood is, right? So you can be part of a nation, and if you meet the criteria as far as lineage, say you have a full-blooded American Indian father, your mother is like white, and you happen to be phenotypically looking more like your mother, even though you're half, and you meet the criteria with your nation on enrollment, you are an enrolled citizen, a treaty Indian, as we call it, that is bound by treaty with the United States. So you are indigenous as anyone else. And then there's ethnic indigenous, which is like me, who is indigenous by blood. And I don't need something like tribal enrollment to somehow solidify some sort of ethnicity. So I want to get away from the word race because I don't like that. And I think that I don't want to marginalize people who are mixed, whether it be African indigenous admixed people, European indigenous admixed people. All these people are equal and they're loved parts of our society and our nations. And I don't want to segregate them, but it's important to understand ethnic indigenous people compared to like constitutional government and what that means.
Right. Okay. All right. I get your viewpoint. I mean, the way we understand race or the way we use it, I mean, it kind of conflates it because it's like when I say ethnic, like I'm thinking what I'm meaning is more like it is you're part of a tribe, you're part of a nation is what I consider ethnic, and then racial is just your blood is what I mean by race a lot of times when I'm speaking about this. So the way I break it down is ethnically, you're part of a nation, you're part of a tribe, and it doesn't matter like what your blood quantum is, right? Because every nation has their standards, right? But in terms of racially, I just mean by your blood. So there's a distinction between those two. So that's what I break it down with to make it easier for people to follow. Because a lot of people get confused with these terms: ethnicity, race, citizenship, all that.
Yeah, I don't really like to use the term race with us because, I mean, what is race other than a social European construct that's been put upon us? You look at the African American diaspora, and a lot of them are Cameroon, Kenyan, Nigerian, West African by DNA, if you take apart their DNA blood, but they're all conglomerated together in this idea of Black or African American. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what Europeans people want to do with us, is that they want to say, oh, you guys all are just a race of Indians. That's not true. We are different. We have different language, different culture, different ways of ceremony, but we all respect and love each other, and we respect the differentiation of our nationhood together. And it's an idea to deconstruct and basically destroy nationhood of indigenous people, because if we're a monolith, you can easily defeat a monolith compared to individual nations.
Well, that is exactly what they're doing right now when they say like we're all Latinos in South America, Central America, and Mexico, right? But I actually agree with what you say, Lakota guy. If it's okay if I call you Lakota guy, or do you?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Thank you, sister. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I actually have a good friend, and he is half white American, and then he's half Quechua, indigenous from Peru. And he was born and raised in the Sacred Valley of Cusco, which is like where indigenous communities live. Even though he looks a little more indigenous, like let's say like he has brown skin, his siblings, they look white. They have light eyes, they're like blonde hair, but they know all the winos. They have a huge connection with the land. They know the songs, the music, they play the music, they live the culture. You cannot tell them they're not indigenous. They are. And every time I go, I learn. Like when I go, they teach me so much. I learn so much, and I can feel it on them. And then we have the rest of Latin America, who they literally, I mean, most of them, they look indigenous, but they do not identify as indigenous. By blood, they're indigenous, but they have no connection. We already know why, right? But like, I was just trying to apply that, what you say, La Coraga, in, in my experience, because, I'm from South America. Yeah.
And I just want to address something in the comments real quick. People are confusing what I'm saying because they subscribe to the settler colonial construct of race. And I want to just make an opportunity for those in the comments that dissent with my opinion in the fact that actually we're not a race, that why would you as an indigenous person, out of all the 525 years of oppression, Holocaust, and genocide that has put upon our people, to agree with colonizers and call yourself something that is a social construct? Why would you, after 529 years of settler colonialism, believe that you are some sort of construct that they would come up with called a race? Well, we have different phenotypes. You look at northern indigenous people, we are 6'2". You look at our Pueblo brothers and sisters, they're 5'5", right? You look at our Anishinaabe Eastern Woodland brothers and sisters, they got lighter skin than I do. They look different than I do. Our Inuit brothers and sisters are way lighter skin than I am. And when you look at our Mapuche brothers and sisters, they look different than, say, our Quechuan brothers and sisters. So this idea of conglomerating all of our experiences into a race and fit a settler colonial construct is bullshit. And I'm going to call it out because you are subscribing to settler colonialism if you believe indigenous people are a race. Because not only are you self-erasing your nationhood, culture, your spirituality, your language, all those practices, you are literally erasing what your ancestors have tried to build by agreeing that we are part of a European social construct. We need to get away from that word.
What I'm going to say is, like, on that one, I disagree, because it's harder to organize for us that are mixed blood or mestizos without using the concept of race, because a lot of us lack that tribal connection or people. So for us, it's like, if we're not going to subscribe to race, we're like, it's essentially we're left out in the wind. What are we? So we go by, we have indigenous blood. That's what we're going with. So we subscribe to race for the organization purposes. I mean, because that's the easiest way to convey it with a lot of people that just don't understand that they're indigenous by blood.
Why can't
you have to be like, that's your race.
Ethnicity. Like, I'm ethnically indigenous, right?
Yeah.
That's what my ethnicity. But my race is a social construct. It's putting you in white, black, red, right? We're not all red, and we're not all a monolith. Why not just say you're ethnically indigenous or ethnically mixed, right? Admixture natives.
But then people are going to get confused with like ethnicity in terms of they're going to think that you have a tribe, because that's how most people like think of the word.
But you
ethnic.
do have a tribe.
I have a tribe, yes, but not a lot of my followers don't have tribes.
Well, I mean, everyone does. They just don't know who it is, or it's hard to reconnect, right?
I actually agree with La Coragai. If you think about like Indians, people from India, they are Asian, right? They don't look like our stereotype of Asian, but they are Asian, but in race it's like they're Indians. It's just so confusing. It doesn't make sense for me to divide us in race. What is the point? I don't get what is the point. Like when I just say if you're Native American, if you're like Asian, I don't get what is the point of that.
Yeah, it's to marginalize brown people. It's to marginalize black people. That's exactly the idea of race. That's why we need to get away from the language of race and go back to ethnicity and tribal relationships. That's what's going to make us, that's what's going to differentiate us from everything else in the social construct. One thing in the comments, someone mentioned that we are race because of our haplogroup. So let's talk about that. Mitochondrial haplogroup A, B, C, D, and X is distinctly indigenous, right? We come from those mitochondrial haplogroups. When we come from mitochondrial haplogroup A, which is the most among us, we can trace our lineage 30,000 years. That doesn't mean we're race. That means that we are all part of one giant relative family that are distinct from one another, that have over thousands and thousands of years have evolved different than one another. That doesn't mean we're all the same race. We're all the same people. It's important to be educated in mitochondrial DNA before you throw it and try to construe it with the idea of a social construct like race.
Well, then what, like, okay, I understand your points, but I just don't see how we're going to socially organize or get people to realize, hey, look, you're indigenous if we don't invoke race, because we're invoking, hey, you're that because of your blood. If we go away from that, then what are they? They don't have the tribe, so they're basically nothing if we don't use race. It's in my opinion, it's putting the cart before the horse to say throw away race when we haven't even organized yet.
Well, race has nothing to do with us as indigenous people. You know, ethnicity does. Your relationship to the land that you have and your relationship to your ancestors and who they are is more important than what the white man wants to call you as a general race of indigenous people, because we're not all one. Because look at exactly what they've done to the African American community, right? They call them all black. You know, everyone's a black people. They did that to subjugate them to slavery and make them all a monolith, which has led to cultural erasure of our African American brothers and sisters. That's the issue, right? So if we allow ourselves to be defined in a monolith, that's the issue. But I agree, Juan Cholo, like this is a thing about language, right? And anything in English is a colonized term. That's why people get hung up on indigenous versus American Indian. Like they're all bad, right? Like none of them are like Lakota or Quechua or Mapuche. Like none of them are something that we called ourselves, right? So it's just it's a nuance. I think that's something that we could deconstruct sometime.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of confusions with the terms. Like I said, I just think the simplest way, I mean, yes, it's not correct of us, but I just think it's the easiest to tell people that aren't super knowledgeable about the terms to just put it simply as like, yeah, you're indigenous by blood, you're indigenous by race, technically. Because I don't know, I just don't think race as a construct itself is going to go away for centuries. So in my opinion, it's best to use this tool in our favor and use it to organize.
I think also to add on to that, you know, we did talk about, which I wanted to talk about more, is the second point of this video, this live stream, was talking about a united, you know, Indigenous council that covers all of us, those that are reconnecting as well. And I think in order for such a council to exist, we must say that, you know, that we are, in fact, we do share something in common, and that we are, our ancestors were here, and we are the original people, you know, of this land, saying that we're native or that we are perhaps indigenous as well. So I think that we must have some common ground here. I think if we do want to put things into place, such as, you know, fighting for others that are less fortunate than us, and bringing in the community that is from South and Central America that is clearly native or indigenous, despite, you know, the colonial terms that are set in place. And I am the type of person that believes that, you know, we are stronger in numbers. And I think with more people that want to support us, then we can really make a difference in this world. And that's what I want. You know, it all started, like I said in the beginning, when I saw what was going on against tribes in South America, where I came from in Peru. And I was just like, okay, you know, something must be done. And that the first thing that Juan Cholo and I talked about was the end of well, it's very impossible to end something such as mestizaje. But picking apart mestizaje as far as, you know, saying something that clearly is discriminating against indigenous people, you know, against, you know, dark skin, you know, saying it's a very Eurocentric term. It was created by Spaniards, essentially, and it was used for division. So in some sense, we must say that we are, you know, native. Now, regardless if we want to say race or not, you know, that's another part. But I think that it is important for us to come together under some sort of native, you know, identity in order for us to, you know, move forward and support one another. I mean, I think the self-hatred in South and Central America for appearing native is very deep for those that are raised in, you know, the Latin culture. I mean, we see it in the media, and I just talked about this earlier. You see it in everywhere. Look in the movies, like all obvious native appearing people are cast in like the low roles, or they're not cast at all. You look in the administrative positions, And as I said before, Peru, you know, you have Pedro Castillo, but it's clear as daylight that there are not many, you know, actual, you know, native people that are in these positions of power. So we want to make a change for that. And I think there has to be some sort of unification to come together. So I was curious on your thoughts on that, Lakota guy. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, I want to address Heidi Alvarado. She's, I don't know, for lack of a better word, lying in the comments section. She's saying that Lakota guy only recognizes people with links to tribes and DNA. I've actually never said that. And Juan Cholo and Marcus would literally not invite me on this program if I disenfranchise indigenous people that are not have nation-to-nation agreements with the United States. I think that's ridiculous. That sophomoric approach to understanding the diversity of what indigenous means as people. And I think furthermore, it's damaging in its lateral violence towards other indigenous people by perpetrating this narrative that somehow tribes that have relationships with the United States somehow think they're better than everyone else. I don't. I'm Lakota. I don't believe I'm better than anyone else. I believe that my sister here, Sisa, is equally as indigenous as I am, regardless if we're in the United States or not. Blood's thicker than mud, man. That's exactly what I think. And I think that this false narrative is harmful for our unity as North and South indigenous people, because we need to stay united and we need to stay together, exactly what Marcus said. So, you know, one of the first things, Marcus, we need to talk about is the International Treaty Council, which happened in 1977. And for those that are really interested in that and are excited about that, I'm excited about that as well, is going back to the United Nations and trying to determine that we want our full sovereignty from the not only colonized governments, be recognized of actually having a seat among other nations in the United Nations. And I think that's important. I think, Marcus, your other question was, how do we unify together, right?
Yes.
And I think part of that is an understanding that we are all deconstructing colonization, and we're on different levels of that, different paths of that. And my experience with colonization may be different than my sister here, Cisa's experience with colonization. But that doesn't mean that I'm or her experience with colonization is less legitimate than mine is, right? We're all deconstructing it together. I think that's what we have to first understand. I think second of all is that we all have to display pride in actually being indigenous, having that identity. You know, there's terms, and I spoke to a Mesoamerican sister of mine a couple days ago about the identity of First Nations, describing yourself as First Nations. You know, I think that is really important to decipher. And if we all agree on that term, then let's go with it. I personally don't care what we call ourselves if that means that we are going to be repatriated and be treated with dignity and respect like everybody else. I mean, that's what we really want, is that dignity back as sovereign nations. And I think for us, it's complicated because, you know, me and I'm sure Sisa, as well as Juan Cholo and you, Marcus, as well, we run into people that are reconnecting. And their first thing is to understand, you know, hey, how do I reconnect? And I don't want to have imposter syndrome. I don't want to feel like I'm not part of my part of the indigenous identity, but I've been disconnected for so long. And I think part of that is always having a good heart and having that openness to saying, you know what, you belong here. You're doing the right thing. No matter how slow it takes you to reconnect with your people, you're still walking down that good path, and that we welcome and we have a good heart with people doing it. But also, I think being active in your community, not only identifying as indigenous, but being part of it. You know, we have Line 3 going on right now, Line 5, you know, which is these tar sand oil pipelines that are disrupting indigenous nations in northern Minnesota and Wisconsin. You know, we have a lot of issues down in Brazil right now with Bolsonaro literally terrorizing indigenous communities and nations in Brazil. And if we all can recognize that all of this trauma is because of colonization and unify behind it and say, you know what we want is to unify as indigenous people, regardless of our diversity, regardless of all our differences in language and culture, if we could recognize that we all want the same thing as being dignified people that are brought to the United Nations, and people who are recognized as being distinct human beings, I think that's important.
Yeah, no, I completely, agree with that point. It is very important, and we all, do come from like diverse backgrounds. I think I wanted to. Sorry, I'm working on trying to bring Clear Bear in. I think he disappeared again.
Yeah, he's trying to join a couple times. It might be his connectivity, his internet signal. One thing I was just gonna say, because I mean, like, I know some of the people are like hung up with the whole race conversation. Is like I hear you, Lakota guy. I hear your points, man. Like, and I agree with you. The concept of race itself needs to go away eventually. But I just personally, I just see it as a good tool because I mean, what Black people used in the civil rights era, they use it now with Black Lives Matter as a unifier, as a way to pass legislation, as a way to work together. So that's why I'm in favor of it. I just think it makes it really simple. It's like and maybe it could be shed in the future, but I just think it's a simple way to put it to a lot of Southern Indigenous people or Southern, mestizos, because it's easy for them to digest and understand this at
Because
first.
we live in the United States.
And because we live in the United States, so we all think in terms of race all the time. And we're just stuck with it for a while. So I just, like, my viewpoint is use that colonizer tool against the colonizer themselves, though. So that's my viewpoint. Certain people say, like, as far as like blood related, like, I know in the comments they'll probably bring this up, but they're like, we have that repeat 9 allele. So a lot of us have that in common as a people, which I agree with DNA wise. But yeah, it's just so much confusion on the whole, you belong to a nation and then talking about like blood, being indigenous by blood. I completely agree. If you belong to a nation, it doesn't matter how low your blood is. If you belong to that nation, then you're indigenous, right? In terms of that, right? You belong to the nation, you belong to the tribe. No one should be sitting here questioning that. But in terms of blood, I think that's also a separate matter. Like, you can be, a half blood or whatever, and just be, the mixture doesn't do anything. You're still racially native. That's just how we put it. Just simplify it. Like, it's terms of you're by blood, you're native in that term, because a lot of my people just don't know their tribe. But I just wanted to address that because, again, like, some people in the comments were like getting worked up.
Oh yeah, you know how it is, right? They just piggyback each other and they just go down. But I agree. Like, I mean, Juan Cholo, me and you are on the same page. I think it's just like little differentiators, right? I'm not bound by any of that. Like, I just want my people to be free, man. That's what it's all about.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, we have the same goals. It's just like, maybe we differ.
Yeah.
We might differ on our viewpoints on how we think it's easier to get there, but we all have our own goals. And like, the fact that we can exchange like our different viewpoints on this and be civil is what's important here. And again,
Absolutely.
We're all on each other's side. We're not enemies. We're all on each other's side here.
It's all out of love. I actually was going to ask Sissa a question, if you guys don't mind. Sister, you said you've been up here, the United States, for quite a while, and I wanted to get your opinion. As a, I hate this term, by the way, Northern Native. I always get deemed as a Northern Native. I wanted to get your opinion. What can we do better to unify and also acknowledge our South American Indigenous brothers and sisters that live in the United States, and how can we do a better job of unifying with you? What are we doing wrong, and what can we be doing better to help your nation and your community reconnect?
I think having a conversation, this is amazing. Also, basically just collaborating, and even if you share a little bit of, I'm always sharing different struggles that we go through in South America and in Central America, or like just amplifying whatever we said. I kind of understand where you're coming from, because sometimes I feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say something about line 3 and just let my fellow brothers and sisters from the north talk about it, right? But then I feel like, no, but I should talk about it that too, right? But I believe, having these conversations and just collaborate together. On TikTok, sometimes we do feel left out, like I have a little group, and we're like mostly they're mostly like Mexican Americans, indigenous, of course, or like from the South as well. And we talk about like we don't feel included when it comes to indigenous TikTok, right? And because at the end is like, we are living here in your land too, and like We have been coming up and down, you know, for thousands, 10,000s of years. And just having conversations, yeah, amplifying our voices and including us. You know, I feel including us, that makes a huge deal. And I believe you're gonna get so much from this, because Latinos in the US, like, we are growing, you know, and mostly Latinos, we're actually indigenous. And I think it's just a huge power force that we can all get. We can really make a huge change in here. And, you know, I know the US always makes, like, sets the tone, you know, worldwide. And I believe if we make a huge change in here, like, other countries, they will see it too, and they will rise up as well. So yeah, I really appreciate that you asked me that, Lakota guy. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious, Sisa, I got it right.
Mhm.
What your thoughts were on you know, Latino and Hispanic, because here's my thing. Like, if you look at a lot of civil wars, especially in like Guatemala and South and Central America, it's a lot of obvious native people fighting on the military side, you know, unfortunately killing off indigenous folks like Mayans. And same with southern Mexico as well. And they live under this identity of thinking that they're Latino or mestizo, therefore I am better than you. Juanchelo and I want to break that mindset, eradicate it, actually, because we believe that we should unify and stop freaking killing each other, you know? And that's what pisses me off so much, is that they, you know, just them, the racism, you know?
Wait, for
So
me,
what are your, sure.
Latinidad and Latinidad and call us Hispanic is just a way of cultural genocide for me.
Yes, thank you.
It's the same as, you know, as a residential school, like what they're trying to do, like kill the Indian in the human, you know, and that's exactly, it's like they brainwash you. Still happening right now. The
Yeah.
US is collaborating. When they say ethnically, are you Latino or Hispanic? Mark this. Why they don't do that with white people from Europe? They just
Yeah.
put them all together. Like, they're white. No. But if you are from South America, or like, no, you have to mark if you're like, they don't call Lakota guy Anglo, because they were like supposed to colonize by Anglos. That's insulting.
Right. Yeah. They don't call them Anglo or Britannic.
No, that is insulting. It is. You call an indigenous person somebody who lives, who respects the Pachamama, who sings, who knows your like our language, you know. It's a whole different lifestyle. Totally different from capitalism world. You know, and I'm talking about like the fact that we need to work to eat. And if we don't work, we don't live. That's a whole different lifestyle that we have as indigenous people, a whole different cosmovision, something totally different. So I am just against the word Latinidad and Hispanic. And then if we talk, today I made a video about it. What is Latin culture without indigenous and African culture? We are not represented at all. If you're talking about Latinos. Oh yeah, people love the tacos from Mexico. They don't know they're Indian tacos. That's indigenous. They love, oh yeah, the vaqueros. Wow, you know, the cowboys, so hot. They're so like blonde, and that's indigenous people from Mexico. They love Machu Picchu. Oh, and Peru is like, everybody loves Machu Picchu. Yeah, I love Peru. I'm from Machu. Yeah, Machu Picchu was built by indigenous people. You know, they don't acknowledge that. So it's just a way of whitewash everything too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question. And now I can finally meet someone who was raised, I mean, there, as far as like the education system and whatnot in Peru. And that is, you know, for people such as myself, you know, if I were to lived in Lima, you know, gone to some school, would I also be taught that I am, a mestizo or Latino
Yeah.
because I don't live in the indigenous culture itself. Therefore, I should embrace mestizaje,
Uh-huh.
embrace mestizo. Is that kind of how the system is ran, I think,
Yeah.
in Peru? Like,
Yeah.
I knew it.
And when I talk about society, it's not, it's what you experience, because I don't know, someone treated you less than somebody else who was like lighter skin. It's because you hear like your family talking like, oh no, we have to mejorar la raza, we have to make our race better, and therefore you have to date someone who has lighter skin. And then you see it in the media everywhere. You turn on the TV and
That's
you see
genocide.
literally call somebody beautiful when they look. You see indigenous people, you can only be indigenous if you wear braids, if you don't have full teeth, if you speak broken Spanish. Oh yeah, they call it broken Spanish if you speak an indigenous language and then Spanish. But they don't call it broken Spanish if it's a gringo and that person is speaking Spanish. They don't call it broken Spanish. They call it, wow, he's super smart. So, well, anyways, yeah, that's what society does. And I believe that most of my life.
So I think, thank you for answering that. So I think that's where Juan Chiloa and I think stand, because we want, as much as we don't like to use colonial concepts, such as race and whatnot, we are living in this system right now where if we want to get rid of the mestizaje and this sort of like colonial thinking, we must come together, and we could use race to our advantage against the colonial system, coming together as one, unifying as one. Again, we would have so much power and so much support. If we can't eradicate the genocide of tribes, at least greatly reduce it, because of the voices that we're giving those that, again, are less fortunate than us, living in rural tribes. We all want to come together for one reason, that is, peace for indigenous people and others as well that are suffering. But I think we can all come to some agreement at that.
I think
I've heard.
like
I
what I sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, like, because we're talking about like Hispanic, Latino, and then in the comments they're talking about like a little bit more about the race thing. I think as far as identity wise, when we talk about demographics, I think you should just hit no for Hispanic, Latino. That's what I do. I don't ever put yes anymore. I just put the Native American as the race, and that's it.
Because we live in the government system, yeah, we have to mark race, unfortunately. Cece, I'm sorry, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say that mestizaje is basically, based on your blood and like blood quantum. And it doesn't make sense because we're all a mix, we're white. At some point, Spaniards were conquered by other people and they are mixed. They have mixed blood too. They don't call themselves mestizos. That just doesn't make sense. Now, I can understand if there's somebody who has a white mom and then a black father. That's a different story, right? But we're talking about here identity, like ethnicity. So that's really important what Lakota guys say, like about your blood and your ethnicity. I was just talking. I got this comment from this girl who is like from Dominican Republic, and even though she looked white, she looked black. She was like, "I'm not black. I'm a mix. I am mestiza because I have white, indigenous, and black in me, but I'm not black." But you look at her and she's black. So.
Yeah, there's definite Central America, not Central America, the islands, I guess, are really interesting because people call themselves something which they clearly aren't. Because this woman, and I brought this up in another video, where I think these people were going around in Cuba and asking them to see what they called themselves, and there were people that looked like you and I,
Yeah.
that were calling themselves, European.
Yeah. It's
Especially
because of the stereotypes that they have. If you there's always, like, they tell me I am not indigenous even though my last name is in literally Quechua and Aymara, and they tell me, yo, you don't live in the Andes, you're not indigenous. And then when I'm in the Andes, they're like, no, like, you're light skin. And they're like, no, like, you're what? Why do they try to not accept my identity? Like, I am here telling you, indigenous people were not a monolith. We have different experiences. I was not born in the Andes. I understand that. I was born in the city. I experienced other things. I experienced a lot of racism. People made fun of. Like, people use my last name to attack me because it is indigenous. So it's like the same with people from the north, you know, like they're always going to tell them, no, if you didn't live in a reservation, then you're not indigenous. No, because you're not wearing 2 braids, you're not indigenous. Because I saw in Disney that indigenous people wear 2 braids and they have a little red skin, and you're not red enough. No, and we are here telling people who we are, so they have to listen.
You know, the problem, you know, sister and brothers here, is that we have people trying to out Indian each other, you know, trying to out indigenize each other, you know. And part of that has been a real bout of lateral violence on each other. You know, I'm looking at the comments, same thing, Heidi Alvarado spewing all kinds of racist rhetoric and marginalizing indigenous people to be one. You got to have brown eyes. You got to have black hair. You got to talk this way. You got to act this way. If you're not indigenous. Who are you to fucking tell anyone they're not indigenous? Who are you to sit there on a high horse and tell someone what their experience is because they happen to have blue eyes, or they happen to have not the blackest hair, or they're short or tall or coastal Salish, you know? It's funny. A lot of the early settlers documented phenotype, you know, what we were, and they looked at a lot of Eastern Woodland people as being, wow, their babies are as white as ours. You know, they were so dumbfounded that indigenous people of a certain nation, their babies were as white people when they're born, and then they got darker. But then they looked at, you know, Southern indigenous people, oh, their babies are they turn out being brown. You know, it's this they were so fascinated with the diversity of phenotypes in this quote unquote new world, right, that they couldn't see beyond their racist social construct. And that's what we're fighting right now. When we think about the term mestizaje, mestizo, I consider the term like savage. I made a video about this today too, that people often use, especially my Northern Natives brother, oh, let's reclaim the word savage. I'm like, you know how retarded reclaiming the word savage is? Savage is a settler colonial term that's meant to marginalize and erase indigenous people. That's the issue. So are we going to reclaim it and like be proud to be called savage? Absolutely not. So why reclaim and try to literally build upon something that's part of the caste system that is mestizo? We need to differentiate ourselves from any settler colonial construct and say, you know what, we are indigenous, we are First Nations communities, and we're not going to take any of these social constructs anymore, and we're going to build upon that. That's what we need to start doing. We need to start gaining the power back from, you know, Europeans and say, you know what, we're going to define ourselves. You don't get to define ourselves. We're not going to meet any type of beauty standard. We're not going to meet any type of social standard or some goddamn Pocahontas standard that you want our women to abide by. We are indigenous and we have a diversity among ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you there on the phenotype. Like, not all of us look the same. Like, I mean, you know, they even say, though, even people with the whole race politics will say there's diversity even within a race. I mean, you will find that in Africa. Like, not all Africans look alike. But yeah, I mean, I've seen people that are 70% indigenous or that have pale skin. Or actually, no, I remember this guy named Adalupa Ra. He sent me a picture of this tribe in Ecuador, and they live off the land too, like very, very traditional, and they have pale skin. So it's like you have genetic diversity in race. We don't all just look a certain shade, and then if you're not that shade, then you're not indigenous. Like, that's also a stupid thing, like, to say. It also goes back to some hater comments that I've heard before. Lakota guy, maybe you could expand on this, but I've heard the whole natives don't grow beards. Natives can't have beards. Ooh, I've heard that stupid shit. Oh. And I'm just like, are you sure? I'm like, so not one of the 100 million natives that lived here before they invaded, none of them had a fucking beard.
Oh, wow.
I was like, you guys kidding me yet?
We're Juan Cholo, you gotta include, like, not for the sensitive after you record this and post it, because we're gonna hurt a lot of feelings, right? But yeah, I mean, we deal with stereotypes, and these are settler colonial stereotypes. It's funny when my mom, and I'm gonna say this, when my mom was pregnant with me, she was at the hospital and a white lady came up to her and she said this. She said, "Oh, well, I know Native women like you guys don't scream when you're pregnant and you guys don't feel any pain when you give birth. So that's, so I understand you guys have a different pain tolerance." And mom's like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Of course I'm in pain. You know how big this baby is?" I was a little fat kid coming out, but it's the same thing with the settler colonial stereotypes of beers. Of course we had Southern Indigenous people that grew beers before 1492. Again, what is it, right? It's a monolith, like, let's all paint them all the same way. Forgive me for having two braids today. I had other things going on. Sorry about that, Sisa. But, that's just a stereotype that we have to deal with. We have so many things we're battling on, and that's part of it. Like, happily grow your beard out, Juan Chola. You're not going to look any different to me and less Indigenous.
And then you tell people this is how Indigenous people can look too. I actually want to add, like, how important is the media, because the media it's really broadcasts everything, right? And most of the stereotypes that we have, it's just a way to, like, I want to tell you this. My mom, she came to the US a couple of 2 years ago before the pandemic. And when I brought her to New York, she was like, where are the Americans? She asked me. It was like a genuine, like a genuine, like an honest question. And I told her, "Mom, we are all Americans in here," like, right? Because she saw many people from different backgrounds and she didn't see as many gringos as she thought. The fact is, my mom, she was born and raised in a small city. And all what she knew about the US, it is what she sees on TV. And I'm talking about, like, news, TV shows, films, and there's basically no representation of us. If there is some representation, it's a misrepresentation. So that is broadcast worldwide. You see, so those people are like, they don't know better. They don't know better. And the media is such a huge deal, because who are the people who are on top of it? It's not like, okay, I'm an actress. I struggle as an actress because I look Indigenous. I am Indigenous. And most of the roles I audition for, it's for, like, the prostitute, it's for, like, the immigrant, illegal immigrant, Who are writing this? Who are producing this? We all know it's not Indigenous people. It's not people of color, So it's really important representation, because that's how it gets broadcast worldwide. And we need to keep them accountable. And that's why it's so important. That's one of the reasons I'm studying filmmaking too, because I feel like it needs to honor reality and it needs to inspire to do better.
I wanted to add on to that is that, at least in the United States, and unfortunately, I think this is how most Americans of my generation and older are brought up to believe that the typical, I say, in quotes, Native American is supposed to look like, have feathers in his hair and be in a teepee or something. I think that's how most of the generations in this country actually are brought up to think of. And it's very unfortunate, because if you look at the education system, and I think Ancient America's brought this up, is that it all starts at 1492 and moves forward from there. There's no talk about, like, other indigenous tribes. I mean, there's very little talk about maybe the Incan Empire, but it doesn't go into detail in the education systems. And it has a really big effect on us, because that's how Americans are raised to thought. So that's why if someone from Mexico comes up and, looks Native appearing, they want to say that, well, I am a Native American too, then they will just laugh, or they not laugh, but they'll question it, because they're raised or brought up in some certain way. Now, and I don't have much experience on discussing South and Central American media, representation other than being born there. But if you look in the positions that are higher up in the media realm, I mean, if I'm not correct, a lot of them are like criollos that are very super wealthy, if I'm not correct. So they push this stereotype of the native, darker skinned person in a negative light. So that has to change. I think it's very, very bad. I think it contributes also to the genocide of indigenous people because it makes us feel inferior of our skin. And that is a recipe for disaster. And it's been continuing for the past, I don't know, 200, 300 years since media came out. I mean, not media, I mean like technology as far as, movies, videos. But yeah, it's that's my thoughts on the media. We have to change that. But of course, we have to have people that also believe in this sort of thinking of like it is. There are a lot of stereotypes created, and they're negative stereotypes of us. They believe that we are savage or something, or living in some rural area. So I think there's a lot of work to do. But I appreciated your thoughts on that, Cisa.
And they always ask me if I am Mexican. Always. They even ask Native American, like, Lakotas, Dines, they ask them if they're Mexicans. Why is that? And you know what? It's funny. Like, I think like 4 or 5 Mexican directors, they won like best directors. Like they won an Oscar, right? Yet they don't have any they don't hire, like they don't make indigenous stories, but they're Mexicans. And it makes sense. I mean, they're not indigenous, Just a thought. Like also nationalities is another topic, but it's like I just feel all the time that they just want our culture, but they don't want our issues. They don't want us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I would say this, it's important to understand the history the United States impact played in Lakotaizing literally the whole idea of what a native is in mainstream media. This happened in the 30s, 40s, and 50s with media. And it happened with the Buffalo Bill Wild West show. For those unfamiliar with that, after the 1867 Fort Laramie Treaty, a lot of Lakotas went on tour with Wild Buffalo Bill, right? And there was a white guy that had a show that went on tour from North and South America, went to Europe, and perpetuated this identity and what American Indian is. And they took Lakotas. And so what do Lakotas do? We live in Tipeshtolas, which is also known as teepees. We look phenotypically Lakota, all this stuff. So this myth of what indigenous identity in the phenotype is perpetuated itself in media, because every time John Wayne got in a war, guess who he faced? An Indian with 2 braids, long hair, and lived in a teepee, right? So it's like this bastardized version of what a Lakota is, right? So that's an issue that we face in media, and I feel terrible for my sister Cisa here that has to face perpetually a stereotype that happened in the 20s and 30s that today she still has to face, of being called, hey, you don't look indigenous like Pocahontas, so you must be Mexican, you must be this, you must be that. It's so ridiculous. And again, it's abiding by a construct, a social construct, that what they deem to be in what looks indigenous and what not to be indigenous. It's an issue among us. I mean, look, Lou Diamond Phillips has had an illustrious career being everyone's indigenous person with 0 indigenous blood. Lou Diamond Phillips' mom is Filipino. His dad is Scotch-Irish, but he's played indigenous roles. I think he's done Lakota. He's played Dene and Young Guns. I mean, he's everyone's favorite Indian, right? But at the same time, we don't have representation in media. And every time we do, like people like Cisa or Yalitza or all these other awesome indigenous actors and actresses, they don't get a play because they don't fit a stereotype.
Producers, they just care about selling. So if there's not a public, who are gonna be willing to watch that, then they don't care. And of course, people, like, how much bullying Yalitza had. because she was actually featured. She got dominated for an Oscar. Like Mexicans were not agree because it just didn't fit their stereotype of beauty. It didn't fit their stereotype of successful, you know. So that's why it's so important, you know, to educate ourselves and to do it massively. And that's why I'm also here, you know, sharing my journey of reconnecting. I mean, it kind of sucks that everything is around money in the entertainment industry, but it's also a way that we can use, you know, to make a change. Mm-hmm.
It's gonna take indigenous money to make indigenous media, to make indigenous spaces. That's the issue. And that's how we're gonna get away from casting people based on a goofy settler construct phenotype. That's the issue. And that's the only way out of this box.
Juancho, are you going to say something? I saw you take yourself off mute.
Oh no, I'm just scanning the comments, man. I'm just scanning the comments and listening to you guys.
There are quite a lot of comments in there, I will say.
Yeah,
there's so much.
there's some people like saying, "Hey, do you want to come on the live?" So, I mean,
hey, anyone's welcome to join.
Yeah, I mean, have we dropped the link in there, anyways? Have we dropped the link?
Yeah, I did. I dropped it, but it was a little bit earlier. So,
all right.
I think I wanted to come back to the second point of this podcast, and it was great. I love talking about the media representation and whatnot as well. Actually, I wanted to reverse that. Go back to the first point really quick. And Cisa, I was curious, did you ever face, any criticism from those of indigenous groups, maybe believing that you weren't native? Or, I think you're on mute.
You're on mute. You got to unmute yourself.
But from indigenous, I got it from indigenous who are not ethnically indigenous, if you know what I mean. If I can explain this, who are not colonized, indigenous who live, an indigenous life. So yeah, I got comments like, "You're not indigenous enough," right? But indigenous people, who that I know, they tell me I don't need to live in a community. I don't need to be indigenous. I have it on my heart. I also have the face, I have the last name, and I just love my culture so much. And every time I learn more about it, I just fall in love more, and it makes sense to me. And it's something that I have inside, in my heart, in my mind, in everything. And at the beginning also, I didn't feel comfortable saying "Oh, I am indigenous," because I didn't know too much about it. But every time now, and then I was like, "No, I'm an indigenous. I am an indigenous who's reconnecting." But now every time I feel more comfortable by calling myself indigenous, and then nobody can tell me otherwise, because I don't care anymore. What it matters is what I feel.
No.
I spent most of my life listening to what society think about me, listening to defining who I was. But this is the time where I am listening to myself, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. That was beautiful. And I think that, we should focus on ourselves and ignore those that try to, insult us or say that we aren't indigenous, because it is our lives, and it's us that we should say that we are native. We want to do something with this too. We want to do something with this identity, and connect to our culture, and help empower others as well, bringing us together. Would you say, Cisa, it's very interesting because in Venezuela, conquistador statues I saw were taken down. And this is a little bit off topic, but have you seen that in Peru as well? There is more of a against, this colonialism, not so much in Peru.
No.
Yeah.
Peru
I guess
has a lot. They're not ready. That's the reason I don't make too many videos in Spanish. Like I feel like I need, if I talk about it in Spanish, I think it needs to be like more breakdown or like very subtle. If not, I'm gonna blow their minds. It's just too much information, they cannot handle it. Because they still believe that they're all mestizos, and they repeat you since the day you're born. We're all mestizos, and they literally make a Peruvian being a monolith, even though Peruvian also is highly influenced by African culture, right? So yeah, Peru has a lot to grow. I think this is it's gonna take time, a lot of time.
But and you would believe that breaking apart mestizaje is the best solution, I think, through a peaceful manner, as far as just like connecting more to our indigenous roots and putting away with saying that we are mestizos, or for example myself,
that's what I'm doing. Because there is there's a census in Peru, and maybe 50%, actually 70%, even though 70% are indigenous, only 20 to 30% identify as indigenous. And I'm talking about race, like blood. So they do, even though they look indigenous, they do not believe they're indigenous. And that's again because of the stereotypes, because of society, because of all of that.
One thing I was gonna say, Cisa, is like, because you probably speak a lot more Spanish and you might agree here. I had a Mexican translator verify this that I use for my articles, and Google Translate will tell you the same thing. But they say that mestizo literally means half breed, so it's an insult too. I don't know why people don't realize that either. But in the Spanish language, it means half breed.
Yeah, actually, it was used here to something that is better than being indigenous. That's the kind of like the weight it has been used. Eco Peruvian, I actually do a lot of Spanish TikTok, so you can follow me and you can check them out. I also do it in English. And I also teach some Quechua as well, because I'm learning Quechua.
Sweet.
So going back to the question, to what you mentioned, people use it as a way to make themselves be better. Like, no, I'm not indigenous, I'm mestizo. My great-great-grandfather was white Spaniard. He had blue eyes. So yeah, I'm not indigenous. Or no, my family, they come from Europe, and I have like 1%. So no, because they have here in the mind that you need to be full blood to be indigenous.
Yeah. Oh, please. Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to over talk. I was going to say, Cisa, it's interesting. I moved to a new area in Minnesota, and my neighbors 2 houses down, they actually are Ecuadorian, from Ecuador, and it was so nice to see a brown face. I'm like, oh yeah, so I run over there, I introduce myself, and I say, yeah, so where you guys from? They're like, we're from Ecuador, and I'm like, awesome, and they're like, yeah, we're from Quito. I'm like, oh, that's cool, man. You got the catchy ones there. They're beautiful people. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah, the indigenous people. You're indigenous. So, like, no. We're not indigenous. No, indigena or whatever, and I was like, oh, yeah. And I was like, and I did one of these things. I looked at my skin, I was like, your skin's the same color, man. Like, hey, well, let's rock it. We're both indigenous. Like, no. I'm from they're like, I'm from Quito, and I'm from Ecuador. We are mixed. But I'm Ecuadorian. And I'm like, so but what does that mean to me? Because that's just like me saying, I'm American. What does that mean? I mean, you're still indigenous, right? No. I'm Ecuadorian. We don't live in the mountains. They started laughing. I'm like, wow. So all indigenous people just live in the mountains, I guess. They can't go to Quito. Is there like a big wall? No. There's no wall. I'm like, so why, like, I was just really confused. I left it alone because I didn't want bad neighbors. Because I'd have been like, right. I don't, I just was like, I was, yeah. I was like, yeah. So, tell you what, let's get together again sometime soon and let's talk a little bit about this. And they left and I left, but it's just, it's another one of these issues. I told Juan Chola, I tried to buy a phone off Facebook from a Mexican guy who called me Indio, even though he was as brown as I was. That was another instance of this weird situation of North and South. So I wanted to get your opinion on that. Like this nationalistic idea that nationalism is above who you are it's confusing to me.
Yeah, it is. Actually, we share a lot. There is a lot of Quichuas in Ecuador. There's lots of Quechuas and Aymaras in Bolivia. And there is always huge fights between Peru and Bolivia that, oh no, this is my dance, you stole it. Why are you singing this song? It's Bolivian. And I was singing a Quechua song. I'm like, sorry, but I have a bigger connection with this person. We're both Quechuas, right? So this nationalistic thing for me is just a way to separate us, to divide us, because like Quechua is not really a nation, because we are not. I mean, I wish it could be a nation. We should be a nation, right? And it goes beyond the borderlines, these colonizer borderlines that they created. Imagine how powerful we would be. We will be the most powerful nation in the whole world, because Quechua people are in Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Bolivia, Argentina, Chile. Yet no, they're like, no, I'm Chilean, I'm Bolivian. But people who are connected and decolonized, they know that these borders were created just a couple of 100 years ago, and we have been brothers and sisters for thousands of years.
So how would you say I can healthfully help them decolonize, right? And just like deconstruct this nationalistic idea. That's the fight, Marcus and Juan Chola, right? Is like, this is where we're at right here, is deconstructing nationalism to understand who you are and your and focusing on that. What would you say is the best way to deconstruct that?
So for me, what works wonderful is just sharing my experience, because not too many people like when you tell them, I'm sorry, you are this and you are not this, and you have to reconnect, and nobody likes that. But if they see somebody is happy, is like enjoying this journey of reconnecting, then they ask like, wow, what's going on in here? Like even what you said, Lakota guy, when you put your hand like next to this Ecuadorian person, you left a seed in there. That person, they're gonna be thinking about it. They're gonna be like, wait, why do we look alike? And that's gonna be a whole process. And that's something that I was sharing with Marcus at the beginning. Like, I understood that we are not going to convince people at that moment. It's going to take time. And it's fine to leave a seat, and that's how, because I know that's how I started. I remember people were they were asking my ex-boyfriend if I was Native American. And when I just got here, and I was like, why Native American? But do I look like Native American? Is there something? Like, why? And then when I Google, it's like, wow, we kind of look alike. Like the hair, the cheekbones. Why is that? I have no idea. I just, everything make connections, So I think it's just like leaving seeds, and people are going to feel it's their own journey, And hopefully if they keep looking for that, they're going to find somebody like you on the internet, somebody like you guys, like Marco, like Juan, and they're gonna have their own process.
Yeah. I also, would say that I've been confused also as Native American from North or South. Someone thought that I looked like I was a part of a reservation in Nevada, somewhere in the northwest part of the United States, the Crow Nation. She had spent a significant amount of time there, and she said that I looked, very similar to one of them. So it's clear that, going back to the Ecuadorian part, that Lakota guy was saying that there are many more Native people than what the history books say there are, what anthropologists say. And that is one of the goals, I think, is that, Juanchelo and I, and I'm sure many other people too, just want to change that, change history essentially with the history books, because there are many more indigenous people, native people that meets the eye, but it's getting people, on board and, bringing us together. And unfortunately, there are many of us south of the U.S. border that are very, nationalized into this thinking that, no, I can't be indigenous. And it's people, that clearly, are native, but they see indigenous in a negative light. So, of course, like, we can't change how, we could within time, but changing the way the media portrays us as is difficult. But changing the mind of someone is not as difficult. It's not a pipe dream. We've brought on so many people on this channel as far as like guests coming in. Well, not that many people, but like people that, as far as like subscribing and wanting to listen to us. So they have changed their mind. Some of the people that are on here that might have thought differently of who they were. So it's not impossible. And when we go that direction, within respect to one another, of course, then we can make a change, because we are indigenous. The books clearly are lying, saying that the native population is so small, but that isn't true. So yeah, I think that, conversations like these are really good. And obviously a lot of people wanted to tune in and listen. But I think what the other point that we wanted to add on to this was that, what would be the benefits of a United Indigenous Council? I think, Lakota guy, that you were saying something about the United Nations, correct? And proposing such a council.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to understand the historical context of indigenous unity, North and South. It started with a Red Power movement in the 1960s, and which led to the construction of the American Indian movement. The Red Power movement was the movement that helped perpetuate the taking of Alcatraz, and that also led to a lot of like Tongva, coastal Salish, with Lakota, with Pueblo, a lot of indigenous people getting together and saying, no, we're sick and tired. We're not going to take it anymore. And that led to, us sanctioning ourselves as a NGO, because the United Nations didn't want to hear indigenous people. So we sanctioned ourselves as an NGO, a non-governmental organization, and petitioned the United Nations to hear us. So that led to the 1977 basically Geneva Council of the American Indians. And then we defined and outlined to the United Nations what we want. We wanted sovereignty and autonomy as indigenous people, North and South. And part of that was led by Mapuche nation leaders that were part of the International Treaty Council. This Treaty Council was indigenous leaders, both North and South. They spoke up on behalf of their nation, said, we want sovereignty and autonomy away from our nation, right? And the United Nations were basically being sanctioned by the United States, because the United States, interestingly enough, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada tried to sanction the United Nations and say, you know what, we're not going to be a part of this NGO meeting of the American Indians. And funny enough, these are the same people with antagonistic history towards indigenous people in colonization. New Zealand with the Maori, right? Canada with our First Nations community, United States with us and everyone else. So it's interesting that even when we have a seat at the UN, these nations that want to perpetuate that, oh, you're part of it, you're part of our nation, you are American just like them. But when I'm asking for sovereignty, you don't want any part of it, right? So this International Treaty Council tried to censor the United States and saying, hey, the United States and other countries in the Western Hemisphere met the exact criteria of genocide among indigenous people. That is putting kids in boarding schools, genocide, raping, dismemberment of us being part of our indigenous communities, and the enforcement of Catholic boarding schools as well. So it met all the 1945 Geneva Convention definitions of genocide. And again, the United States decided to censor the United Nations. But Marcus, long story short, this is another great opportunity for us to get together and have another international treaty council. We could get away from this idea of like these people in the comments, and they get so stuck on things like what an indigenous person looks like, and Heidi perpetuating these stereotypical racial myths of what indigenous people look like. It doesn't matter, right? Let each nation determine what is indigenous for themselves, and let's all come to the table, and let's literally go back to the United Nations as one unity and say, you know what? We're not going to put up with ICE detention centers anymore. We want full autonomy and sovereignty of 574 federally recognized nations. So my tribe, the Rosebud Sioux Nation, we can deport kids from ICE detention centers, deport them on reservations so they have food, housing, clothing, educational, reunite them with their families, have them part of our sovereign community, have them gain wealth, opportunity, whatever they need, and go back towards their community and completely change the system that way. That we are uplifting other indigenous people with our sovereignty. That's what our future is right there.
I think it's awesome what you're saying, Dakota guy, because most of the people who are in ICE detentions are indigenous, yet they call them like Latinos, Hispanics, and as I mentioned before, like we have been migrating for so long from north to south. I totally agree with that. Yeah, I think it's brilliant.
We can do it. We can do it, Marcus. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh no, thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Dakota guy.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm loving everything that you said, Dakota guy. Like, it really resonates with me a lot, because I want to make a difference in this world for us and those that have suffered for so long. Like, it's time for the suffering to stop. Set aside our political differences to come together. I mean, look what's going on. You see the ICE detention centers as well. Clearly, they're mostly indigenous. Doesn't matter what someone else says, So I am for this. Now, getting others on board. And do you think that such a beautiful proposal in my mind would require more people from other tribes as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Marcus. This is what this StreamYard, for some reason, I get a pause and I think I could talk, and you know what I'm saying? So I apologize. It's my fault if I talk over someone. But no, I think what you were saying is true. I mean, I'm one nation, and I've talked to my elders in my community, and I propose this idea. And what we want to move, and just for those that don't understand what our fight is as Lakota, as Sioux people, right? We are fighting IRA institutional governments. What that means, and I don't want to bore people, is basically in 1974, 1934, I'm sorry, with the Indian Reorganization Act, they said, you know what? You goofy savages have no responsibility to organize and go to your traditional government. So we are going to institutionalize a constitutional government. That's why you have tribal councils. You have all these different regulations with each tribe. What we want to do, what the Lakota people have spoken about, is go back to our traditional ways of government. Part of that is the Ocheti Shokoin. What is that? What that means that we go back to our lineal chiefs, our hereditary chiefs, and say, you know what? We are rejecting settler colonial governments on our reservations. We are rejecting how you define us as being indigenous. We are going back to our traditional ways. So we're getting close to that. We're getting very, very close. We're actually going to be talking to the Supreme Court about repatriation of the Black Hills. If we were to get that, then we could talk about complete sovereignty of the Black Hills. That means that we are a defined by the United Nations sovereign place, sovereign nation. As far as other tribes, look, 574, there's a lot of money here and there. Shockingly, Midewiwin Sioux community pulls in $200,000 a person per cap. There's nations down in LA that are pulling in $180,000 per tribal member per cap. So, I mean, for these people, they may not be an option, but for us as Lakota, our first and fundamental act is to be Lakota. And what that means is to uplift our community. And that means not only just Lakota, all of us indigenous people. So I can only speak for what I know and my elders is that we are completely on board with being sovereign and also working with other indigenous communities and bringing them to where we are, and just getting away from the settler colonial construct of borders and detention centers and breaking up families, and allowing them to go in an indigenous community and say, here's your house, here's a job, here's some education, and arm them and indigenize them enough so that when they're ready, they can go to El Salvador, they can go to Honduras and fight that good fight there, and knowing that they got backing of their North American indigenous relatives. That's where it lies. And I think, talking about it, continuing to partner with other indigenous relatives is really key. There's going to be dissenters, man. Of course, haters are going to hate, right? But that doesn't mean that we stop the momentum. We stop going forward. We stop being united, and we stop going arm to arm and saying, you know what? We don't like this system. We want it fucking changed, and we want it changed today. That's what we want to do.
Yeah. Someone clapped. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, brother, that we want change now. I've seen people make TikTok videos, and they're ready. Like, indigenous people are ready for this change. So, of course, still steps need to come into place to wake this up more and ignite this fire, because I see positive change, in the future for us. So again, thank you all for coming on. That was just really powerful, Lakota guy. So.
Yeah, no, and it's an honor. It's an honor to sit here with my sister Cisa, with Juan Chola, with you, Marcus. I consider, and I love you guys, and I consider you guys part of my indigenous family. And I know that when we have that mutual love together as indigenous people, we could fucking move mountains, man. And we are suffering enough as it is, with not only ICE detention centers, line 3, line 5, this idea of kill the Indian, save the man. That has been in perpetual motion for 529 goddamn years. We need to end it. We need to end it today. And part of it is this. These goofy people in the comments that keep on bringing up race, what a person color is, all this stuff. All that stuff is settler colonialism garbage. It's garbage, because none of that changes anything. What changes is having an open mind and loving one another and saying, you know what, besides all our differences and our diversity, we have to come to the table and say, we want our dignity back. We want respect back, and we want our sovereignty back. And more importantly, we got to make a better future for our goddamn kids, because there's indigenous kids out there that are looking at themselves like, I don't want to be Indian. I don't want to be indigenous, because indigenous is ugly. The indigenous is wrong. We need to change that narrative and say, you know what, look at Cisa here. She's in movies. She's an actress. She's doing her own thing. She looks like you do. Be empowered by that. And they see people like her. That's representation, man. The more representation we have of young men and women like you guys in power doing things, you see little kids look up to you and say, I want to be like Juan Chola. I want to be like Marcus. I want to be like Cisa. That's where our fucking power is, not arguing stupid shit in the comments. This is my opinion.
Yeah, I just think, I agree with you, man. And what I like about you is you present a lot of solutions. You present a plan forward. It's not just theory with you. You're presenting a good solution, and I'm all for the council. It'd be great. I could always present that idea to my elders when I go down to my tribe here in September next month. I'm visiting them, which I'm really psyched to do. They're really excited. We're announcing it to the community, and they're all pretty psyched I'm going down there. So yeah, it's gonna be great. But yeah, I'll present that idea, dude. Because it'd just be amazing just to all come together like that and lobby. Because I know our tribe itself is trying to get recognition from the state, San Luis Potosí, but they've been reluctant because a lot of us, they live there in the city, and they live how a regular person would be an average citizen. They have their jobs, they work from home, but they have the culture, they have the history, right? But the state is reluctant because they're like, well, you don't live sectioned off in an isolated little village, living off the land like it's the 1800s. It's like, bro, they don't have to. That's a really racist requirement. They don't have to do that to They still got their culture, their traditions, and everything. That's stupid. But it would go a long way too. He'd definitely be in favor of that.
And we need to be solution centered, man. We could go on about, you guys have dealt with this. You have this podcast, and you guys have dealt with TikTok, and everyone talks about all this other goofy garbage. No one wants to talk about solutions. I was actually talking to Bob Blake. He's a Red Lake Anish and I have a tribal member. He has a manufacturing plant for solar panels. And I was like, how do we get solar panels on reservations to create jobs and to create energy sovereignty? So when we talk about sovereignty as a nation, we don't have to pay the United States, pay the state of Minnesota, South Dakota money. We could be sovereign with our energy as well. These are solutions we need. That's why we need more indigenous people in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, to come up with these solutions so that we can not only indigenize our mind, but be truly sovereign with our own internet and our own energy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love all the solutions, and I definitely know that we can move forward from this point. Despite, what we see in the comments with the disagreements, I know the one thing that we all want is to come together, and support one another.
Right, exactly. And I've seen some of this a little bit in the comment. I'm going to tackle it now, where I've had some people are doubting, maybe some new viewers are doubting because they're mestizo or mixed that they can't say that they're indigenous. Yes, I say you can absolutely say it. You have the blood. That's what you are. My opinion, again, I'm still holding race as a unifier because I think it's just simple for right now. So in my opinion, that's your race. It's because of your blood. You don't have to be pure. You don't have to be 100%. My only caveat again is if you're gonna say that that's your identity, you need to hold to that. You need to, especially with your family or friends, you need to do that demographically. And again, do not apply for any benefits for that would go to traditionally like indigenous people. If you're gonna do that. But yes, you are valid. If you're 40%, you're valid. If you're 30%, you're 50% indigenous. You're mixed. You're still racially indigenous, in my opinion. And that's an opinion that Marcus shares here, and probably Lakota guy and CC if I had a guess.
Essentially, we just want to turn the colonial system on its backside. Right.
And but yeah, don't call yourselves mestizo. It's an insult. It's a half breed like a dog. I mean, it's demeaning. It's like a mudblood. Don't call yourself that. That's a colonizer term the Spanish created themselves. There's no such thing as mestizos until they brought that with their caste system. So don't engage in that bullshit.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll say this. It's a lazy way to be indigenous. Learn and do your history. Juan Chola, you can actually hire him to help you find your relatives, to help your family, to do all the work with your ancestry.com. A lot of people just stop at certain, no, I'm just indigenous. I'm just going to stop. No, find out where your people are from. Find out your history, because it may surprise where you're coming from, and it may change your aspect to get away from goofy arguments like talking about race and talking about social constructs and talking about who is or who isn't indigenous. When you have a connection to a family member, and interestingly enough, Juan Cholo or Marcus, one of you guys said it last time, that there's a lot of full-blood indigenous people that had Spanish last names that were assigned Spanish last names. So just because you have, Ramirez, so whatever your last name is, doesn't mean you're mestizo. That could be just assigned. So you could have more indigenous blood than you think you do.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to reiterate that point that I've put out in my TikTok. I've traced with my genealogy to what is it now, 69 full-blooded indigenous ancestors. That's a shit ton that's a huge fucking number.
Minus the beard, though. Minus the beard.
Minus the beard. But anyways, the thing is, Mexican genealogy-wise, it's tough to even find one for a lot of people. But I found fucking 69. But anyways, I've traced these guys in the 1700s. And they're not there after a certain period. Why is that? It's because they were not Christian before that. And then they joined the church, and then suddenly they have a Spanish last name, but yet they're full-blooded. It's because it's fucking assigned to you. It's called christening. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point. But yes, do the genealogy, do the research. Don't just take the lazy route and just be like, oh, I'm just indigenous and that's it. And Marcus, I'm not targeting you. I know you're adopted. That's way different, bro. That's not. I'm not talking about people like that. Yeah. No, I'm talking about people that they know their parents, your grandparents' name, and it's like you just don't want to go trace it. Like, go trace it, or hire somebody to trace it for you. That way, because me finding out that I was Guachichil and joining that tribe, you can't put a price tag on that shit. All of the 700 hours it took me to do it, I would do it. I would do double, triple that, an infinite amount of hours if it would lead me to the truth and the answers. And it did. It was well worth well worth the whole thing. And when I started, some people might just be like, well, I don't know how to read the Spanish cursive because it looks like some alien language. Well, I didn't know how to read it either at the start. But I just stared at it for so long, that I developed the Sharingan like Itachi, and I was able to read it eventually. So
Also wear super handsome shirts like Marcus has. That helps too.
Hey, I'll give I appreciate that, Lakota guy. I'll give my shout out to Warandina again. Little
Has the pocket. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, she sells amazing, Indigenous shirts and many other things. So shout out to her. But yeah, Cisa, were you going to say something? You put yourself off mute.
Yeah. Basically, it's just asking questions, because even though, like, yes, there's some last names that they were like adopted, right? Like Spaniard last names, but also like many indigenous last names were like basically translated into Spanish. So like, for example, like Condori, it comes from Kuntur, and that's Quechua, or like the people who have a last name Flores, that comes from like another Quechua word, which was like tica, like Waita, and like there's so many. It's just asking questions. Like there's so many traditions that you will, if you ask about it, like, oh, we have this family tradition, we always go and do this. That comes from indigenous. I have a friend, and she always say like achachao, atatao, and I was like, do you know that's Quechua language? And she was like, no, this is from my city, from Arequipa, like that's Quechua. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. So basically it's just asking questions, question whatever. Sometimes we just accept different ideas, but it is important to question.
Yeah, no, I agree. Going back to the point really quick, is saying like, yeah, there's 100% like indigenous people who were given like Spanish last names like Gonzalez or Rodriguez. So then someone just assumes that, you must be Spanish or something, which isn't true.
Also, there's a lot of people who, especially like maybe 50 years ago, they changed their last name because they just didn't want it to sound, didn't want it to be related with indigenous people. Half of my family actually changed my last name, that is Quispe, because they just don't like the fact that it's indigenous, and now my cousins, they have a different last name. They look indigenous, but they don't have an indigenous last name. So again, asking questions.
Yeah, it's the racism perpetuated, from the people up top.
The racism doesn't help at all. It actually kills our identity as well.
Oh no, I completely agree. But we're making the steps to eliminate that.
Yeah.
And I think we're on the right path. So that being said, anyone have any other final words they'd like to say? We're going to try to keep this under 2 hours if possible.
Lakota guy, I really hope you follow me back.
Yeah, if you could message me, or how can we do this?
I don't
TikTok
think
is such a terrible platform sometimes.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Just comment on one of my videos, and I'll follow you back. I don't know what your username. I'm so forgetful too. So
but yeah.
Okay.
I'll make sure to make a comment in one of your videos. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so happy I got to meet you, though.
Yeah, I'm happy to meet you. I'm likewise a fan, so it goes both ways, man. I'm excited. I wanted to say thanks to Marcus and Juan Cholo for creating such a great space here and allowing us to speak this way and allowing me to be a guest. Also, my sister Cisa here, who I just met. But I want to say this to everyone in the comments and everyone that's watching as a closing thing, that as Lakota people, we're taught that we are supposed to respect not only ourselves, but everyone else's walk. Regardless of who you are and where you are in a reconnecting experience, know that you are equally indigenous to all of us here, that you are loved by your community, you are valid by your community, and you have a place among us, and you are important, and you are someone special towards us. So we need your voice to keep on reconnecting. We need to still be a part of our community. And for those that are interested in actually getting together and be part of this type of conversation, this is the space that we need to make a better future for our kids and make a better future for the self-esteem of our young indigenous brothers and sisters, because they're looking at us and they're saying, how can I reconnect if I don't feel good about reconnecting? How do I reconnect if it's not cool to be native, or it's looked down upon? You need to be the person, the light on the top of the hill to say, you know what? It's okay to be indigenous. It's okay to look the way you do. It's okay to sound the way you do. And we love and respect you. So continue to love one another and respect each other's journey, because regardless of anything else, we're in this battle together, and no one's going to talk about indigenous issues like indigenous people. That's why this place is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks again.
Yeah, I wanted to add that, well, at the beginning I mentioned, right, like we have this, most of our education in regards of indigenous comes from a colonialism narrative, a colonized narrative, right? So spaces like this, when we get to actually talk to an actual Lakota guy, to an actual Quechua person, this is really important. We are actually learning and educating ourselves. And as mentioned before, like, you cannot love what you don't know. And I am talking about our own journey as well. So it's really important. Starts by yourself, right? Educate yourself. Make sure it's not from a colonialism narrative, of course. And yes, Marcos, I'm very thankful that you invited me, and it's very nice meeting you, Juan Cholo. And I'm so honored to be sharing this conversation with you, Lakota guy. And I'm looking forward to having these conversations, because we're all in this together. And at the end, we are here to create a change. And I think we are already doing it. Mm-hmm. Thank
Completely. No, thank you. No. Thank you so much, you both, for coming on. Like, we love the dialogue. We love the conversations. And I know, like, again, in the end, we all want one thing, and it's peace, world peace, indigenous peace. We want good things for everyone. We want to see a difference and a change. And I know that, you know, through this conversation, like, look how many people, tuned in. It was great, So yeah, we will, I think, end this broadcast, and we can chit chat a little bit. But Juan Cholo, do you have any last words?
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, the infighting in the comments, like we got our disagreements. Me and Lakota guy might not agree 100% on everything, but at the end of the day, he's still my brother. Treat each other as brethren. Like, we're all indigenous. We're all in this together. We might have our disagreements on how we're gonna get there, but we're gonna work together. So don't get super aggressive, guys. Like, at the end of the day, we're all family. So yeah, I'll just but anyways, out of the entire live, I would say that the most important takeaway of this is for the haters, we hate you too.
Okay, one thing I want to add is that we are reconnecting, right? And some people, we might be in different levels. Sometimes we are not going to be able to understand, that we need to learn and educate ourselves a little. It's a process. So I feel like if I maybe will have this conversation with Lakota guy like a year ago, I wouldn't be able to understand, or like many things that he says, right? So it's a process. And I know, like, some stuff, it might be shocking for people because they're just starting their journey. But the more you educate yourself, the more you will understand. It's a process. That's all I have to say.
Yep. Yeah, it is a process, just doing the work and finding out more about yourself. Even me, even though I was adopted, I'm learning more about, other indigenous tribes and where we all come from. So yeah, just make sure that everyone that's watching, make sure you're doing the work, to connect to your roots. And for those that aren't native, just having a better understanding of us, it's really great too to see. That being said, I saw some infighting today, so just make sure that, we do try to be as respectful as we can, to each other, because in the end, if we continue to infight, then the Spanish conquistadors and those that tried to separate us, they're winning. So just make sure that, we all have one goal in common, and that's stick together and do the work for a better, more prosperous future. That being said, again, thank you all for coming on. I'm going to end this broadcast. We can chit chat a little bit. I will say goodbye for now.